Hello, and you're listening to interview show number 241. My name is Kate Kaminsky, and today I am lucky and honored to be interviewing the great author, Mr. Jonathan Dee. A little background on Jonathan. He's written about 5 to 6 novels, if I'm right, around that number. Seven novels. One of them has been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He teaches here at Syracuse University, both undergraduate and graduate. His previous works, including working at the Paris Review, and I believe teaching a couple other places. Am I correct? Yes, all right. So, Jonathan, first off, let me say thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Like I said, it's just about your art, so nothing too deep or weird. So let's jump in. So the first thing I want to ask, and this is something I think about with just a lot of other writers that I meet, what got you into writing? Like, specifically creative writing and fiction, and like, when was this in your life that you said, hey, I want to do writing, I want to do this professionally?
What got me into it, I think, is the same thing that gets everybody into it, which is reading. Initially, that when I was young, there was nothing really that meant as much to me or made me feel as engaged as just the whole world of books, and I wanted to be a part of that. So there was I would say, like, when I was in high school, I would think like, one of the things I want to be is like I want to be a writer. But then there's wanting to be a writer, and then there's actually wanting to write something.
Right. Okay.
And I didn't really feel like I had anything that I wanted to write about or a story I wanted to tell until maybe like senior year of high school is the first time I really ever tried to do it.
Okay, yeah. So senior year of high school is when you finally decide, I want to try and write something. I want to try to like see if writing professionally is like an avenue for me.
Well, I wasn't thinking at that point really professionally yet. I just wanted to try it, and I had a very sympathetic teacher, in high school, somebody who I felt comfortable doing that kind of independent project with, and so that was the first time I ever tried it in any serious way.
Okay, great. That's awesome. I mean, around senior year of high school, it's actually when I said, hey, I'm going to try and write something myself, so that's kind of cool to hear that someone else did at the exact same time. So, you went to college at Yale University, which, is a great school. It's Ivy League, of course. Being an aspiring writer, someone getting into writing during your college years, what was that experience like, being an aspiring writer in college, and how did that period overall influence you to become the writer you are now?
It was a long time ago, and Yale at that point really only had 2 fiction writing workshops that they offered, and I took them both. And the first one was, kind of mediocre and a little strange and discouraging, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. And the second one, which I took with an author named John Hersey, was absolutely life-changing, and I think even today a lot of the things that I do in classroom are stolen directly from him. He was a huge influence on me and really made me feel like that this was something that I wanted to try to devote my life to. That he was, and that was the very end of my senior year. So that was by far really the most formative thing that happened in those years for me.
So the 2 fiction workshops, were they like 2 years for your freshman and sophomore, and then 2 years undergraduate? How did the program work throughout the 4 years?
Well, there was no creative writing major, no creative writing concentration, nothing like that. So I took, as a junior, I took this first one, and then as a senior, I took the one with Hersey.
John Hersey.
Who had to be, you had to apply to get into that.
Okay.
It was limited to 10 people, and that was a new experience for me too, the idea that you had to apply to get into any class. So, and he was the only teacher I ever had, I think, that my parents would have heard of. He was very well known at the time. I think probably less so now, but kind of sort of a celebrity writer, which was a new thing for me too. And someone who he was at that point right before his own retirement, so he had been doing this for 50 or 60 years.
And your time with John Hersey, that was your senior year?
Yes, fall of senior year.
Yeah. Okay, fall of senior year. Okay, wow, that's cool. Besides, was it mostly like your junior or senior that maybe had the most influence, or did you feel you had influence throughout your 4 years as a writer at Yale?
Like I say, it was mostly at that point about reading, and I was still doing a little bit of writing on my own on the side as a freshman and as a sophomore. Not that much and not that seriously. I didn't get that really disciplined about it until I started taking, the few classes that they offered. So it was on my mind, but I didn't really, bear down until until the end.
Okay, yeah. Speaking of being at the end, your first job out of college was at the Paris Review, which, is now, at least in my humble opinion, a foremost creative literature magazine, which means you were in New York, you were working at the Paris Review. What was that experience like as someone just coming out of college, just kind of getting into writing, really being serious, and you're working at the Paris Review?
Well, it was mostly great.
That's good. Hopefully,
I kind of, there was a lot of luck involved in my getting the job at all. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about it was that I got to spend my working days surrounded by other people who cared about the same things that I cared about. Mm-hmm. Or putting together a good magazine, reading and writing, fiction, poetry, and interviews. It was kind of a dream. I think. As first jobs go, it was really fantastic. I think if there's any kind of downside to it, it's that I was living in New York and I was working with literary people and going to so that I heard a lot about the publishing world and how much money people were getting for this or that book. And honestly, when you're a young writer and you're just trying to get good at what you're doing, it's kind of it might have been good for me not to be hearing that so much. I might have felt less pressure about what I was doing. I think there's an argument to be made for going in the other direction and just, working as a bartender or something so that you're really just in your own head and concentrating on your art rather than hearing a lot of things about the business.
Okay, yeah. How did you get the job at the Paris Review, by the way? It's always something I've been personally curious about.
When I was a senior and I started thinking, I need a plan for after I graduate, all I did was I wrote letters to, I think, 6 places that I had heard of. Okay. Some of them were publishing houses and some of them were magazines. And 5 of them wrote back to me and said, yeah, we don't have anything for you. And the 6th one was the Paris Review, who never wrote back to me at all.
Oh, okay, wow.
And so fast forward to maybe September or October after my graduation. I had a summer job that was over. I was pretty broke and desperate, and I'd interviewed for things that I didn't even want and not gotten them. And then out of nowhere, the Paris Review calls, and it turns out that somebody had just unexpectedly quit. And they sort of blew off the dust on the resume file and called up everybody. And most of those people had already found jobs. I had not. So I said, I was really, I lucked out that I was available and came in and interviewed for the job and ultimately got it.
Oh, wow. That's lucky. Because I just think about today, Paris Review, the New Yorker. Most people, it's kind of like the Devil Wears Prada. It's many people would kill to have that job.
Sure. Well, this is one of the things I didn't know because you said Paris Review and New Yorker. I was sort of thinking of them in the same way. Okay. But the New Yorker is a massive operation.
Right. Yeah.
The Paris Review, unbeknownst to me, had 4 full-time editorial employees. 4.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's much smaller.
Tiny.
Oh, okay.
Tiny. So that's why it was a little bit more of a improvisational kind of operation there, and they, like I say, they just looked to see what resumes they had lying around, and mine was there.
Oh, okay, cool. So what, if you don't mind, what exactly was your job at the Paris Review?
I started out as, like I said, there were only 4 of us, so we could kind of call each other whatever we wanted. So
oh, okay,
so I think when I started, I was already on day 1. I was like an assistant editor, that was it. That's where you start. So my job was initially about half doing editorial work on the magazine, which involves reading unsolicited submissions, proofreading the magazine, all the business end of or the editorial end of putting together a magazine like that. And the other half was working as an assistant to the founding editor, who was George Plimpton. I don't know if you.
I've heard the name before.
Yeah, and George was at that time a huge celebrity, and just kind of answering the phone for him, taking care of his correspondence, taking care of a lot of things for him. The office was directly downstairs from his apartment, so some of it was initially a kind of personal assistant job. Oh,
okay, so personal assistant, but with the 4 of you, you can call it whatever you wanted, which is why you're able to read and write so much poetry, which honestly sounds great.
Yeah, it was great, and we could we did. We had to have anything that went into the magazine approved ultimately by George. Okay. But the thing is that if he one of the good things about him was that he really trusted young people, and so if we were excited enough about something, he would take it even if he didn't really see our point. I mean, actually, this book right here is a great example. I don't know if you know that book, Jesus' Son, by Dennis Johnson.
But I do know Dennis Johnson.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the the really formative books of the latter part of the 20th century. And we happened to get the first story in there just in the mail. It's called Car Crash While Hitchhiking. And we were all so excited about it we could barely contain ourselves. And I'll never forget him sort of coming downstairs, holding it and saying, like, I don't really know what you guys are talking about. But if you're this excited, then we have to
let's do it. Yeah, that kind of, just said, like, just a person named George just saying, I don't know what kind of story this is, but if you're excited, let's go. Kind of reminds me of another George that I think both know.
That's true.
It does, yeah. It does remind me a little bit. It's like something about writers named George. Just, I guess, something.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned living in New York. I believe I have also asked you about this sort of one-on-one. Again, also out of pure personal curiosity because, as filmmakers dream of LA, writers dream of New York. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you felt almost a little discouraged or something slightly to the left of that, being in the New York literary world and being immersed in that. Were there any benefits, do you believe, like, in terms of maybe being inspired or networking, or like, were there...
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, well, I should say that New York itself was not a strange place to me. I was born there. So,
right, yeah, I was actually asking, because you were born in New York, so you know this town.
I felt very at home there. As far as networking goes, yeah, looking back on it, for sure. I mean, that's I got together with my agent, who's still my agent today, because a friend of mine who also worked at the magazine was a client of hers, and that's the kind of thing that's not going to happen if you're attending bar in Arizona or something like that. So yeah, there's a connectedness for sure to living and working in New York. But like I said, there's two sides to that in terms of your development as a writer.
Do you ever miss it, living and working in New York, or is that sort of behind you?
Well, I mean, I lived there for a long time. I moved up here to take this job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like 5 years ago or so, and mostly I miss my friends. But the expense and the complication and the kind of constant anxiety of living in New York at this point in my life, I don't really miss it that much. I'd like to go back and visit, but that's okay.
I get it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, just maybe I'm just so enamored with this image of literally New York. I presume it's not anything like the stereotypical bright lights, big city image. It's a bit more grounded than that. But I imagine it was an excellent experience just for you as a writer, for any writer, to be living, working in New York, writing in New York. Going back to mentioning how reading got you in the writing, which is actually going to be really appropriate for this next question. Are there any particular subgenre of fiction that you enjoy writing and or reading?
Now? Today?
Now? Ever?
Yeah, I mean, now,
now or ever, either one.
I can think of, formative writers when I was about your age who really meant a lot to me. And one of them was Raymond Carver, who's got a strong Syracuse connection.
Right.
Who was, very popular at the time.
Yes.
And I think I was kind of writing in that vein then. I don't really write that way anymore. Now I think, now that I've actually written some books, I think now I'm more drawn as a reader to writers who are very different from me.
So like speculative fantasy.
Well, sometimes, or even literary fiction writers who were just like Dennis Johnson would be, again, is a good example too. Right. Just I read it and I think, wow, I could never do this. This is so different from me. That's kind of the thing I admire, is just to be transported into a kind of consciousness that's very far away from mine. Whereas when I was younger, I was looking for people who were doing the kind of thing I wanted to do.
Okay, I get that. So now that you have actually written some books, it's more about the reading for pleasure, if I understand that correctly, and just sort of I guess immerse yourself in things that I guess are different. And what I'm getting from this is there's no one subgenre that you love. Like, I love speculative, I love gothic horror. I particularly love to write realistic fiction, like a John Cheever-esque story kind of deal. Or
no, all kinds of fiction. But I mean, fiction itself, let's not forget, is a genre.
Is a genre.
I don't read as much poetry as I used to. A lot of the education I got in contemporary American poetry honestly came from working at Paris Review, because then I had to read it constantly. But mostly what I read these days is still fiction, novels, and stories.
Absolutely, yeah. Fiction is one of those things that's like amorphous. It just, it changes with time. It changes with space. And, now I gotta ask you the big one, my friend Mr. Jonathan Dee. I know that writers and filmmakers and artists have very, very different answers when it comes to this. I'm just gonna ask it. What is your writing process?
Oh,
I'm sorry. I had to ask from a writer to a writer.
That sounded like it was going to be way scarier. No.
To some people, that is scary. I've read some interviews. For example, I read a Barry Jenkins interview. Someone asked Barry Jenkins about his process making If Beale Street, and he said, "Oh, hey, are you okay? adapting a gay man's novel, and he's like, let me ask you something. Have you ever been to Mars? Of course you haven't. We made movies about it. Those so
yeah.
you know,
No,
yeah.
My process is nothing. I mean, you know, I've kind of tried everything at this point. One of my favorite quotations about writing, which I may even have mentioned in class already, is from the late Robert Stone, wonderful novelist.
I believe you did mention this.
Yeah, who said the reason writing is so difficult is that nobody cares if you do it.
No
or
one
not.
cares.
And what that means, practically speaking, is that if I sit down to write and instead I goof off and look at the internet and I don't write anything, I'm not going to get in trouble with anybody.
Right.
You have to be very self-motivated and self-directed. So I've tried everything to get myself, you know, to be more disciplined. And the thing that works for me ultimately is very simple, which is that I don't have word counts or page counts or even, you know, a set amount of time that I need to work every day. But I need, when I'm working on a novel especially, to sit down at the desk and do some work on it every day. And some days go wonderfully and some days don't go wonderfully, but it's the everydayness that's important. So I do still handwrite for first drafts of all my fiction. If it's nonfiction, if it's magazine work or something, or review, I don't do that. But for fiction, the first draft is handwritten, just a pen on a legal pad. But like I say, apart from that, the only rule I set for myself is just, you know, did you go to work today?
Oh, okay.
And that keeps me from it keeps me productive, but also keeps me from beating myself up too badly, which is a occupational hazard.
Yeah. I believe you actually mentioned in class, going off that quote by Robert Stone, that some days it's not even really about getting from the A point of the intro to the B point of the denouement, the conclusion. It's more or less, here's like a random situation, if I remember correctly, and it's more for you about just what comes next, and then what comes after that.
Yes, and when I say every day, I mean that involves some days that involves literally making yourself do it, because you don't. It's either because you don't feel like it or because you don't even have an idea. But that's the thing I've learned over the years is just if you sit down and make yourself do it, that you may produce some bad writing, but you will also surprise yourself at some point in a good way, even if it's just with an individual sentence. So yeah, it's a matter of just pursuing it and thinking like, what's next? What's next? A lot of that you may wind up getting rid of, but there'll be something in there you'll find that you didn't know was there.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes when I write, I'll often hate everything I wrote from the day before, and the one thing I thought was like a random thing, I'm like, yeah, let's run with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I recently read an article on a Syracuse article. I think it was the Syracuse News, right? It was an interview with George that happened a while ago that said he once got inspiration from watching people at Wegmans. Do you have anything that gives you... So true. It's kind of like, for me, it's Trader Joe's on Erie, but whatever. And I'm wondering, like, is there anything particular that you do in terms that help you get inspiration, like almost like a trade or dare I say ritual that maybe like helps you get in the mood or get inspired?
For inspiration? I don't think so. Nothing like that. For one thing, I feel like when I'm working, I need to be. I need like total solitude. I couldn't really. I'm not one of those people who could go sit in a cafe and write, for instance. I can't.
Oh, okay. And I believe you also mentioned you can't listen to music.
No. I need sort of sensory deprivation for that.
Okay.
So, and so as for where inspiration comes, I mean, I think for me, it just comes when you're not out searching for it.
Okay.
Often you find that you've remembered things, you've retained things, even little things, not even necessarily big ideas. But you've held on to something that you've seen or something that you've heard or somebody that you used to know. That's kind of, you've retained it without knowing it in your head, and when you're looking for something to fill in a blank in something you're working on, you find it's right there.
Is there... Oh, yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. But I wonder if there is any merit to be had with the writer who, you know, metaphorically goes out into the open field, takes a shovel, and just digs and digs and digs and spends 90% digging and the 10% finding what they're looking for and polishing it and then working with it.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, whatever works for you is the thing that you should be doing. There's no. I can. So back to the Paris Review for a second.
Yeah.
When I first started there,
Mm-hmm.
we probably are familiar with that magazine is probably best known for its interview series called Writers at Work.
Yes.
It's a series of interviews with authors. And I would take those home, literally the old issues of the magazine, every night, and I would read them, even though I frequently didn't know who the writers were who were being interviewed, because I really thought at first like I was looking for the way to do it. Like, what's the secret? How do you do it? And what I learned, of course, was the opposite, which was that they had all gotten to the level of success or fame or whatever that they'd gotten to in astoundingly different ways. That it was all very personal, and whatever worked for you, you should pursue that, and that was the way to the goal.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. I mean, like, I talked to, I spoke with this on with George one time, I'm sorry I keep bringing him up so much, but he said, it really depends on the day sometimes, for most writers. It's, some days you know exactly what you gotta write, and then some days you wake up and you're just like, oh, I just thought of this idea, let's run with it, kind of idea.
Yep.
Yeah, no, but I absolutely agree, I mean, it's probably not just one way, it's probably a bunch of different ways, but, speaking of just writing and your books and everything, your fifth novel, the Locals, was...
Oh, that was technically the seventh, but it's my most recent
one. Okay. I was like, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
So your seventh, technically seventh novel, the Locals, was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It was a finalist.
It's actually, it's my fifth novel was called The Privileges. That was in 2010, and that's the one that was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Oh, damn. Okay, I'm sorry. I got that confused. All right, so let me read that again. His fifth novel, The Privileges, was the Pulitzer Prize finalist. I didn't put the title. I put your fifth novel. You know what? Oh, Locals also says finalist. So you have two novels. That's next to my name, not next to the title.
Oh,
that's how they fudge it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when they see this picture, they'll. So your fifth novel, The Privileges, was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Can you tell me a little bit more about the writing specifically of that novel, and then I guess your thoughts on this is nominated. This is a final for the Pulitzer.
Well, that's the book that took me the longest to write, but that's not because it was the hardest or anything. It was mostly because of other things going on in my life. Honestly, I was a stay-at-home father at that point with a young child, so I worked on that book for a long time, and it was a novel about the obscenely rich. The characters didn't start out that way, but they certainly ended up that way. So I did a little bit of research to try to, because that's not a life that I'm familiar with.
Right.
At the end of it, in order to make sure that everything in it, that there was nothing in it that really didn't ring true, I showed it to a friend of mine, the father of a schoolmate of my daughter's, who ran a hedge fund. And I said, does this sound okay to you? And he actually had me change a couple of numbers in it because they weren't high enough.
Okay.
But otherwise, that was it. And as far as the Pulitzer, that's an unusual kind of a unique prize in that you don't find out ahead of time that you're a finalist.
Okay.
They announce the winners and the runners up at the exact same time. So there was no. It's not like the National Book Award where they have a long list and then a short list and then a month goes by and then there's a ceremony and there's a winner.
Yeah.
There's a day on which the prizes are announced and they announce the winner and the two runners up. So I found out that I almost won and that I lost at the exact same moment.
Oh wow! I'm sorry. I thought it were differently. I thought it was again more like the National Book Award or. I have to presume that the Man Booker Prize works the same way. Yep. There's nominations, there's a ceremony, runners-up, winner.
Yeah.
So you didn't even know, just out of the blue, someone just got at you, hey, John, your book was a finalist for a Pulitzer.
Yep.
Kind of like deal, okay. Oh, wow, that's jarring, man.
My publisher called me.
Okay.
They were very excited. They were, because it's still...
Oh, that's still an honor, of course. Sure. Yeah, like a Pulitzer finalist. But, I thought it was, again, one National Book Award, thinking like, okay.
No, pretty much every other award is like that, but this is the
Okay.
Yeah.
So it just kind of came along. What made you want to write about the ascension to wealth, essentially?
Yeah. Well, it was... I think the thing that sparks my interest a lot of times is that if I feel like there's a type of experience that I have a hard time understanding, that's remote from mine. And all my life, I mean, I went as a kid to fancy schools, but I was the scholarship kid.
Okay.
And then, again, as a parent, it was like a little bit of the same deal for my daughter. So I've always been I've always been sort of like up against the window of that kind of life, but never really been part of it. And I felt like, the people that I did know who lived that kind of life, they looked at the world differently than I did. And I just wanted to try to put myself in that skin and think about how the world appeared to somebody like that. Your approach to things like risk, your approach to memory or to loss, it has to be really different in order for you to take the kind of speculative approach to money and success that the characters in this book do. So, like I say, it was the sense that on the one hand I'd known people like that all my life. On the other hand, I didn't really know them because they were not
right. Yeah.
They were in some interesting way not the same as me.
Yeah, no, that definitely plays in the phrase that I think is like a true mantra of all writers, that writers write what they know. And that definitely plays on it's like, oh, I know them, but I don't know them, so I'm going to write about knowing them and also...
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think you want to write not to demonstrate something you know, but to discover something.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Just to recap something you mentioned earlier, because I thought that was hilarious. So you mentioned you went to a friend with advice, someone who was wealthy, and they told you that, like, oh, no, we're much wealthier than that. Add, like, 3 zeros, essentially.
It was a little bit like that, yeah.
That is great. Like, I something I never forget that, being like, if anyone asked me, like, if I wrote God willing, if I wrote a book like that, I'd just be like, someone told me to make it richer, so I did. So there you go. So, as we've clearly established, you are a fiction writer, a novelist. Have you ever, as someone, who's actually read poetry, worked with poetry at the Paris Review, and just as an author and artist in general, would you ever like to try writing other forms of prose, or maybe even script writing, like dramatic writing?
Yeah. Well,
has it ever crossed the mind?
Yes. I mean, the last poem I ever wrote was in college, and that will definitely be the last. I don't even like to think about it because I just have no talent for that whatsoever. But I do like to write, and I still do write other types of prose. I was a reporter for the New York Times Magazine for about 10 or 12 years. I still write. I write literary criticism now for the New Yorker, and before that for Harper's and other places. And I enjoy doing that. I tried. I would like the opportunity to try script writing. I don't know if I'd be any good at it or not, but I'd at least like the chance to fail at it. But the only opportunities I've ever been given have been to adapt my own work. Okay. And I think I would find that too difficult. I would really rather adapt somebody else's. I don't think I've seen other people adapt my work for the screen.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and they if you feel free enough to change the things that need to be changed, you can get a great result. But I think I spent so long writing the locals, for instance, that those characters, I would have a hard time changing them. I would have a hard time changing the events of the book in the way that you would need to do to make a good screen version of it, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like, just to keep audiences, if they've read the locals, you're going to have, of course, your loyal fan base, loyal to the original structure and prose, and then you're going to have people who want to see change. Have you ever, like you said, you've really wanted to try dramatic writing, or had the opportunity to, and you've had the chance to adapt your own work. Why not go the Jay McInerney route? And, I love both the book and the movie, Bright Lights, Big City, but admittedly, a lot of those scenes are word for word from the book.
Yeah.
Why not just go that route if you don't mind asking, if you're worried about, staying true to the original story and characters? I
mean, the thing is, it's not up to you. This is the thing about books being adapted as movies or TV. Pretty much, nearly every one of my books has been optioned by somebody for that purpose. But the thing is, like when you take that money, when they option the book, they own it. They may come to you for suggestions or ideas or cheap labor, or they may not. So it's not up to me. If the locals is bought by a well-known TV producer, and I have not heard from her since that day, because she's got her own writers, she's got her own ideas, and I think their feeling is that sometimes involving the original prose writer, sometimes that's not a good idea for exactly the reason I'm talking about, that they're too faithful to their original vision.
I get that. Yeah. You know, I talked to Nana. We talked when he was here in October about this because I actually wanted to show one of my scripts, and yeah, he mentioned that like he was changing up some of the stories, with the exception of the titular story Friday Black.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh yeah, no, you can I can change them around a little. Friday Black has to be the same, and that's why that's. I don't know if that's he was a little ambiguous as to which one is the movie, which is the TV, but
yeah.
I just said honestly,
yeah,
that's my dream, just to adapt my own work.
Some writers can do it. Some writers, you know, have a great time doing it. I would not, you know, like I say, if I were ever going to try to write a screenplay and find out if I'm any good at that at all, it would be much easier for me to do it with somebody else's work. I
find that true to myself as well. Like I read a story like I want to adapt this rather than take one of my own short stories and be like, oh no, I can't do this to my work. You mentioned a couple people you've worked with, George Plimpton, John Hersey.
Mm-hmm.
John Hersey. Who would you consider to be your greatest mentor through your career and through your writing life?
Oh, I think it would have to be John Hersey. It would have to be
John Hersey.
That was, you know, partly because of the, you know, the age I was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I really, when I look back at it, I really feel like that was, you know, if I hadn't had that experience, I'm not totally sure my life would have gone in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
So. George Plimpton was a wonderful guy and great to work for and be around, but that was a different experience. He was my boss.
Right,
and Hersey was really much more of a mentor.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think it'd be weird if I called you or Nana or Arthur my boss. It's like, no, I can't think of him that way.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it was, when I was a freshman, it was kind of hard for me to even think of some of the faculty here, like George and Arthur and Murray Carr, as like people. I kind of thought of this like these. I'm like, so when I figured out they drive, they eat, it was almost like a revelatory experience.
Yeah.
Like sort of like a I have no son moment. Everything is different now because they are people. It's like just like me. So no, I get it. But like I get at that age, whoever your mentor is at that age. So in your case, John Hersey, they're put on this pedestal, and then you owe so much to them.
Yeah.
I absolutely get it. Are you working on anything right now?
Well, yes and no. I mean, not right now because this happens to be a particularly busy moment in the semester.
Of course.
But I'm
long term.
I've started a new novel.
That's essentially what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Like, have you started a new one?
Yeah, I would say maybe optimistically I'm a quarter of the way into it. So
okay. So it's not Palladium.
Well, no, that's from.
I saw that. I'm like, I wonder if that's like. I know that like when a novel comes out, they have like 5 different ways the cover can look, and it's like, I wonder if that's one of them. So it's not Palladio. Can you tell me anything about the new novel or the new story? Like even just a little or no?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty superstitious about that.
I get it.
It has to be very close to done before I'll dare tell anybody about it.
Absolutely, I understand. And I just want to conclude this with, I guess, a very big, lofty philosophical question that I think we as artists and writers kind of ask ourselves a lot, and that is, what do you believe is the most important obligation writers have as both people of everyday society and as artists? Because, a lot of people make the argument that, like, artists have the advantage of seeing things from a different lens than everyday people, but at the same time, we're writing for everyday people. We're writing, we're writing not only these stories everyday people, we're writing for them. And I'm just wondering, like, do you believe there's like an obligation we have as writers to the craft, to people, or it's so open-ended?
No, I think or there is an answer to that, but the answer is personal. It's a one size. Like I feel like I, as a writer, have a particular obligation to and relationship with contemporary society. But I wouldn't say every writer has to feel that. Like Samuel Beckett didn't have to feel that, and he did okay.
That's true.
It really it depends on your own. You just have to be faithful to the thing that brought you to want to write in the first place. Right. And for me, that's very much tied to feeling like. Like I say, wanting to pursue things that I'm curious about and feel like I don't know about the way we live now. But not every writer's like that. So I wouldn't put my own try to tell anybody else that they should feel the way I feel about that. Oh yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I don't think that necessarily is our place as writers or people. But when I was first getting into writing, I just sort of I sort of was told by someone that you can't always write for yourself. I mean, I suppose you can if it's like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose that's kind of a
tricky to navigate around, but that was just kind of what I was wondering. Like,
yeah, well, there's writing and then there's publishing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think like when sometimes people will ask if when I'm writing, am I imagining a particular audience or a particular reader or a wide readership?
Yeah, do you?
And the answer is never. I mean,
Never.
because
Okay.
when I'm working, it's really just about me and the work. There's nothing outside of that. It's just about me trying to make something that satisfies that I think is good. But then at a certain point that ends, and you know you are like. You do presume to put yourself out in the world, so you have to care what people think about it, and you have to think about. But for me, those are two separate things. It's not ever on my mind when I'm working.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I get it. And just sort of keeping it personal. That's as all writers do, I suppose. As all writers do. And that concludes my questions for again, Mr. Jonathan Dee, professor, writer, family man. Once again, Jonathan, thank you for letting me come in. This was such a great experience. It was an honor for me to interview you.
Thank you.
I know I'll be seeing you in 45 minutes for class, so it'll be a very different dynamic. Once again, I'm Kate Kaminsky. This has been an interview with Jonathan Dee, sort of a writers on writers thing. And catch you on the flip side, I guess. Perfect way to end up.